Are you team tank or are you team keep it together? We will discuss that here on the DLLS Mavs podcast as the Mavericks, of course, 9-16 after their first 25 games, are going to have a decision to make maybe not too long from now with where this team needs to go from a direction standpoint and if they are going to go down the road of building around now the 18-year-old or try to keep it together to maybe wait until Kyrie Irving comes back to try to make a run in the postseason if they're able to get there via the play-in, most likely. Bobby, I'll start with you on this one. Are you team tank or not to tank?
I don't want to sidestep the question. I promise my answer is not sidestepping the question, but it's going to feel that way. You don't have to make that decision right now. You know, oftentimes you can see it coming. Like, there are already teams in the league, are just they stink. Like, no offense, Ron, the Wizards.
Pretty bad.
Wizards aren't very good. They don't have to make up their mind to tank. Like, that decision has already been made. The Mavs, though, I mean, like you said, Kyrie could come back. AD could stay healthy. Derek Lively, Daniel Gafford, we don't know when they're coming back. It could be soon. So the best case scenario is that the Mavs get healthy soon and are able to compete for a playoff spot, in which case tanking would make no sense. But if AD gets hurt again, if Kyrie, his rehab takes longer than expected, if Lively and Gafford are out for a really long time, they also might not have to make the decision. It could just be made for them. I don't think that they need to, as we saw last year, lose 60 games to get the number one pick. Last year, the Mavs finished, I believe, with the best record in the NBA of any team in the lottery.
39-43.
Yeah, and they still won. So, the landscape has changed with the flattening of the odds and all of that stuff. So I don't think you need to commit to just losing and sucking as much as possible because whenever you do that, losing becomes the expectation. You become okay with losing, and I don't want Cooper Flagg to ever be okay with losing.
Ron, this is a team, of course, who does not have control of their draft pick from the years 2027 through 2030. Next year is the last year for the next 5 that they have control over their first-round pick of the 2026 NBA draft, which is a very deep one and a very good one. So, given where they are you willing to continue to keep it together or start to bottom out?
Yeah, I know a lot of Mavs fans are on the team tank train, but today I would like to play devil's advocate on team keep it together.
Okay.
One, the Washington Wizards and the Utah Jazz, who had the 2 worst records last year, did not get the number 1 pick or the number 2 pick or the number 3 pick or the number 4 pick. So just because you actually do have the worst record does not mean you will get it. In the year before that, guess who had the number 1 pick? The Atlanta Hawks, who had a solid record. I think they were like the 8th or 9th worst record. So you don't have to, quote unquote, tank to even get the number 1 pick. It's not a requirement, and we've seen with the new draft odds, it's not necessary. And for team keep it, Kyrie Irving, Anthony Davis, we've really never seen them really play basketball together on the same court. I'd like to just see it a little bit just to see what can happen. What are they going to be able to do together? I'm not saying that I'm extremely high or that can win a title or anything, but I am saying it would be nice to at least see them attempt to play basketball together. Think about how fun that would be, KG. You could have Kyrie Irving at your point guard. You could have Max Christie as your shooting guard. Cooper Flagg at your small forward. Your power forward, hopefully PJ Washington. And then at your 5, Anthony Davis. That's a really, really good starting 5. I don't know if that can beat the Oklahoma City Thunder, but that team can compete in the Western Conference. And sadly, we haven't seen it. And we may never see that lineup healthy, but it would be really fun. So, and I'm pretty sure some Mavs people are thinking, hey, if we can get that lineup on the court, some things can happen. And then even if you, quote unquote, don't trade the people this year, if that lineup looks good and maybe you just miss the playoffs like last year, the summer could be really fun for this team.
Well, that's where I think that's the core of the argument. I do not believe that if fully healthy, the Mavs can beat the Thunder. I don't think that any team in the NBA can beat the Thunder. They're missing Jalen Williams that still went 19-1 or whatever.
It's very loud.
Shea didn't play last night. They won by 40. They are beating everyone's ass. So it's like, if you're not going to beat them anyway, then I understand why fans would say, well, then just be as bad as possible, because after this upcoming draft, you don't have your picks. This is your team. You don't have control of a single first-round pick for another 5 years after this one.
Ooh.
So I get if you're not winning the title, which is the point of this whole deal, right? The whole point of playing basketball is to win. If you don't think that you can win, then why not try and increase your chances of winning next year and the year beyond and the year beyond and 10 years from now? And that's why I think that ultimately ending up with a better draft pick than not is the best way to go. But you have such little control over where you end up in the lottery anyway. It's just like, man, whatever. But what I also think that I don't really want the Mavs to finish like 8th or 9th. Like, I'd rather them finish like 12th or 13th if they're – I don't want to play OKC, dude. It's going to be bad.
Because now you're getting to the core of my argument when it comes to this particular situation, because here's what it feels like the Mavericks are dangerously getting close to. What do we always laugh about over the last 4 or 5 years in the Eastern Conference?
The Chicago Bulls.
The Chicago Bulls. Like, either you decide to go for it, which Chicago has never done.
Good guy.
And they continue to find themselves in either 9th or 10th with a record of 39-43 for the last, 4 or 5 years.
But we don't have Zach LaVine on our team. Sorry.
You don't, but you do have a potential generational talent in Cooper Flagg. Do you want to live in a world where right now you're a second apron team with expensive older veterans who at times can't stay healthy, and you see a bright future with an 18-year-old where if you decide that, hey, with the 26 draft class that you have, we can get a cheap, young, talented player that can go along with help us building the future, do you decide to do that? Because I would not want to be in a position where I'm, the mediocrity, spinning the hamster wheel of mediocrity for the next 4 or 5 years. Because, I mean, you're right. The Oklahoma City Thunder are about to run the West, granted they stay healthy, for the next 4 or 5 years. You still got to go through teams like Luka with the Lakers, Anthony Edwards with the Minnesota Timberwolves, Nikola Jokic in the Denver Nuggets. If you're not competing at the very top of the Western Conference, you might need to find a way to get as close to it as you can in the future rather than trying to eke out a play-in spot. So this team is too good to purposely tank. If they decide to do so, it will be an organizational decision to do it because of what is in front of them and the lack of control that they will have after 2026 that could make this decision a little bit easier. But I do not want to live in a world where the Mavericks are steadily competing for 8th and 9th spots to get their ass kicked by the Oklahoma City Thunder. Granted, they stay healthy for the next 4 or 5 years. I don't want to live in that world.
Quick trip in a time machine back to 2018-19. That was Luka's rookie year. It was very obvious by around this time of that season that this guy was going to be pretty special. Mm-hmm. Now, over the course of the next few months, it became even more obvious, but something else happened during that time. They traded 2 future first-round picks, one of which was unprotected, and Dennis Smith Jr., and some expiring contracts for KP, for Tim Hardaway Jr., for Trey Burke, for Courtney Lee. And, Bob Voulgaris has gone back, has since said, like, yeah, we shouldn't have done that. But the Mavs essentially made an all-in move during Luka's rookie year. And, I thought at the time, man, this could work out great. You got a young guy on the way up. You got another young guy on the way up. Like, they could be good for 10 years. Well, they weren't, and 2 years after making his debut with the team, KP was on his way out of town for Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans. And now the Mavs still ended up going to the conference finals that year, and they made a finals run later with entirely different teams than the one they had whenever they made the all-in move. But they were really hard-pressed to make any other moves to get good players because all of their picks were tied up in that trade because they were already over the cap. And what you don't want to do is end up with a 21-year-old Coop, and you're like, man, everyone around here has gray hair except for this 21-year-old. Like, what is the team going to look like in 2 or 3 years? Like, you don't want to constantly have to reinvent. You want to have some sort of foundation. And maybe Ryan Nembhard is part of that. Maybe Max Christie is part of that. Hopefully Derek Lively is part of that.
Hopefully PJ Washington remains a part of that.
Yeah, but there's a lot of question marks with all of those guys.
Yeah.
Some due to health, some due to, are they legit or not? How much better can they get? And what you don't want to be doing is answering those questions whenever you're in the second apron and you can't make any moves.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can only sign guys to minimums, and you're waiting for a 35-year-old to get off a max contract. Like, it's really, really tough. The economics are almost as important as the on-court product when having this conversation. But, yeah, I mean, I want as many good players as possible, and I think that losing 5 or 6 more games than maybe you want to this year could be a really, really, really good way to get a stud in the building. It could also all be for naught. They could have the 14th pick and draft a bust. Who knows?
And I'm not implying that Cooper is not going to pan out. And what I'm thinking is that you look at the landscape of the West over the next immediate 3-4 years. Oklahoma City, if healthy, is going to remain at the top of the West. Nikola Jokic still has another 3-4 years in his prime if he continues to remain healthy. Oh, that young dude who's in Los Angeles who just turned 26, is going to be 26 years old in February. You got to go through him and his Lakers team over the next 5, 6, 7 years. Anthony Edwards is only 23 years old. Like, you've got a lot of teams that are really, really good that have established superstars now that are in better positions to compete. So your ability to get to the top of the West in the next 3 or 4 years is going to be very, very difficult if you don't find a way to get younger, get cheaper, and find a way to get yourself another player alongside Cooper Flagg. I think Cooper Flagg is going to be a sensational player and going to be do so for a long time. How quickly can the Mavericks build a contender around him to compete with those teams over the next 4 or 5 years is going to be a very difficult question for them to answer. And oh, by the way, they still don't have a GM yet to figure out what the ultimate vision is going to look like for this team. So that all has to get settled before you ultimately, I think, make a decision on what the future looks like. But yeah, the West is going to be hella hard for the next 4 or 5 years.
Forever.
If all these teams, in front of them stay healthy. And right now, it's tough, man.
The future comes quick because this summer, the Mavs will have to figure out what to do with Ryan Nembhard, who will be an restricted free agent.
He'll probably be. He could be signed
unless they make a move, but they have to have the foresight to make the move to give him a contract before that. But he could be a restricted free agent. Derek Lively, extension eligible. You got to figure that out. Anthony Davis, extension eligible. You got to figure that out. Klay Thompson will be an expiring contract. Brandon Williams, unrestricted free agent. You got to figure that out. Najee Marshall will be going into the final year of his contract, which is looking like a complete steal, but you'll have to figure out what to do with him. Max Christie, same thing. Like, a lot of the guys on this team that are playing well right now
can get paid.
They could either be gone or you're going to have to pay them a lot, and the Mavs are already in the second apron next season. That's before giving out any of these extensions. That is a dangerous place to be. So it's a real quagmire that they're in right now.
Yeah.
One thing I do want to say, though, is that in most drafts, if everyone wants to just go look at the last drafts, look at the top 3 picks in all those drafts. The top 3 players are usually never just the top 3 picks. Like, you have to draft Jalen Williams for the Oklahoma City Thunder is a number 2. They drafted him, I think, pick 12. Like, players like Johnny Davis were drafted over him at pick 10 by the Washington Wizards, sadly. So what I'm saying is that you don't have to get in the top 3 to get the second or third best player in a draft. Actually, more than likely, that's not what's going to happen. The Wemby draft, it was a big thing. Man, Wemby or Scoot Henderson, because Scoot Henderson is really good. Why does Scoot Henderson look now? He was the number 3 pick in that draft. Brandon Miller, good player. Is he better than Amen Thompson, who was the 4th pick in that draft? Probably not. You do not need a top 3 pick to get even the second or third best player. And to be fair, in most drafts, the second pick is probably, in the history of the NBA, is shown not the second best player in that draft. There's a good player in Arizona. There's a real good player down there in Houston. His name's Kingston Fleming. He's a good point guard. There's a lot of good players that aren't going to be, quote-unquote, the top 3 guys. A good player at UNC. We'll have some guys to talk about at the end of the season. That's all I'm saying is you don't need a top 3 pick to get your number 2 guy.
You don't need one.
I don't want people to freak out if the Mavs somehow don't get a top 3 pick. You don't need that. The OKC Thunder did not always have that. I don't think they didn't hit the number 1 pick after the Paul George trade. They never got the number 1 pick. I don't think they hit the number 2 pick. Like, Josh Giddey was like the 5th.
Chet was number 2, I think.
So Chet was number 2.
Yeah.
So they didn't have to get the number 1 pick, quote unquote, to even rebuild around that. A lot of the players around the edges, the Aaron Wiggins and AJ Mitchell, who I saw the other week, these are not top picks. You have to just hit kind of where you're at. Now, we don't know who the Mavs GM is. So we don't know their acumen for scouting players, but
well, we do know they don't have any firsts or seconds after this year until 2030. They have a second in 2030, and then they have a first in 2031. So it's like, this is it. This is the draft. The higher you pick, the higher your chances are of getting an All-NBA and All-Star caliber player, obviously. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, there have been plenty of busts over the years, and the Mavs can't afford to bust. They cannot swing and miss.
They can't miss.
Yeah,
whatever they do,
cannot miss.
Yeah, it's got to be a player, at least that plays.
Yeah.
Just give me a rotation player. But if you want Coop to have a running mate, then there's a few guys in this draft that I think would qualify for that.
Whether you're on Team Tank or Team Keep It Together, the Mavericks got several decisions that they got to make over the next few months to decide what the future is going to look like around Cooper Flagg going forward.